A clear midday sky over Ahmedabad, a routine departure from runway 28. Passengers settling into their seats for what should have been a long but uneventful journey to London. And then, in less than a minute, everything changed. Air India flight, AI-171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner with 241 people on board, lifted into the air, and seconds later, it was gone. What happened in those fleeting moments has stunned the aviation world. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was an event so fast, so devastating, and so baffling that investigators from across the globe are still piecing together the chain of events. Now, after weeks of forensic analysis, cockpit data review, and expert simulations, scientists believe they have uncovered the truth behind the disaster, and it's more shocking than anyone imagined. This is the story of what happened on that day, the minute-by-minute sequence that turned a transcontinental flight into one of the deadliest aviation accidents of the decade, and the discovery that could change how we think about safety in modern aircraft forever. June 12, 2025. Local time, 1:38 p.m. AI-171 begins its takeoff roll down runway 28 at Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. The aircraft, a 12-year-old Boeing 787 Dreamliner, had passed its pre-flight checks. The weather was clear, with no wind shear, no storms, and no bird activity in the departure corridor. On paper, everything looked normal, but eyewitnesses along the runway noticed something unusual almost immediately. As the Dreamliner rotated, its wings failed to show the typical upward flex, an indicator that the flaps and slats, crucial for generating lift during takeoff, might not have been fully deployed. Within seconds of becoming airborne, the aircraft appeared sluggish, struggling to climb. Then, over the radio, an urgent mayday call. The crew was in trouble. The jet banked unnaturally, stalled, and in an instant, the nose dropped. With horrifying speed, the aircraft descended toward the Mini Nagar district. It smashed into a medical college hostel, igniting an inferno that consumed both the fuselage and the building. 274 people, passengers, crew, and those on the ground, would not survive. Amid the wreckage and chaos, there was one voice that offered a glimpse into what happened inside the cabin. 23-year-old Vishwas Kumar Romesh, seated in 11A, somehow survived with burns and fractures. From his hospital bed, he described the moments after takeoff. A sudden shudder, the left side of the cabin crumbling, the door detaching, and a rush of heat and smoke. He remembered scrambling toward a jagged hole in the fuselage and jumping, driven by instinct rather than thought. "I thought I would die," he told reporters, his voice shaking. His words painted a vivid picture of structural failure and total loss of control, a scenario consistent with the theories investigators were beginning to consider. Romesh's account matched eyewitness reports of the aircraft's erratic climb and stall, reinforcing the suspicion that something critical had gone wrong in the cockpit during those first few seconds. With the crash site secured, teams worked around the clock to recover the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. Boeing and GE Aerospace dispatched technical teams to Ahmedabad, joining investigators from India's AIB, the US NTSB, and the UK's AAIB. The focus quickly narrowed to one possibility: a catastrophic configuration error at takeoff. Preliminary analysis suggested that the co-pilot might have accidentally retracted the flaps instead of the landing gear, robbing the aircraft of essential lift at the most vulnerable moment of flight. Observers had already noted the lack of wing flex during takeoff, and the stall that followed was consistent with insufficient lift. Meteorological data, bird strike analysis, and engine inspections ruled out environmental and mechanical factors. What remained was human error, or a systems failure that mimicked it. Digging into maintenance logs, investigators found a detail that made the picture even more complicated. Just weeks before the crash, the left-wing flap actuator had undergone servicing, but the quality control sign-off was delayed due to a shortage of spare parts. While this didn't prove a direct link, it raised uncomfortable questions about whether a mechanical fault, possibly a sensor misalignment, could have fed incorrect data to the cockpit. If a faulty position sensor told the crew the flaps were extended when they were not, a pilot's decision to retract them would have seemed perfectly normal. In modern jets, even small errors in feedback loops can cascade into disaster within seconds. This possibility meant that the AI-171 crash might not be a simple case of pilot error. It could be the result of a subtle but deadly interplay between human action and flawed automation. Once the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were transported under tight security to New Delhi, the decoding process began. Engineers and safety investigators worked in a sealed lab, analyzing thousands of parameters: flap and slat positions, thrust lever angles, autopilot and auto-throttle engagement, and every piece of cockpit communication. The voice recorder revealed the exact moment the situation spiraled out of control. 30 seconds after liftoff, a calm but urgent voice from the captain asked about gear up, followed almost immediately by a sharp tone from the stall warning system. Seconds later came the metallic sound of switches being moved. Too late. The stall warning blared again, then a loud impact and silence. What caught analysts' attention was the absence of any checklist callouts for flap retraction. In modern aviation, these verbal cross-checks are vital safeguards. Their omission hinted at either extreme time pressure or confusion in the cockpit, possibly triggered by misleading system cues. The flight data recorder confirmed that the flaps were retracted to zero just moments after takeoff, precisely the configuration that would strip the aircraft of the lift it desperately needed. Given the severity of the crash and the type of aircraft involved, the investigation quickly became an international effort. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, sent a team of flight recorder specialists and systems engineers. The UK's Air Accidents Investigation Branch, AAIB, brought expertise in human factors and crew training protocols. Boeing dispatched structural engineers and avionics experts, while GE Aerospace focused on the JANX engine control systems. Under Annex 13 of the Chicago Convention, all parties shared data in real time. Simulations of the final moments of AI-171 were run in full-motion flight simulators, replicating every instrument reading and control movement recorded in the black boxes. Test pilots reported that with flaps retracted at such a low altitude, recovery would have been nearly impossible, even for a crew that reacted instantly. The findings pointed toward a chilling truth. In aviation, a single split-second misconfiguration can create an unrecoverable chain of events. As fragments of the investigation began leaking to the media, public outrage grew. Families of victims gathered outside government offices in Ahmedabad, Delhi, and Mumbai, demanding faster answers and immediate reforms. Hashtags like Number Justice 4, AI-171, and Number Fly Safe India began trending across social media, reflecting a national mood of grief mixed with anger. In response, India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA, announced a nationwide safety audit of all Boeing 787 Dreamliners in the country. Inspectors began conducting surprise checks at airline maintenance facilities, reviewing flap actuator service histories, cockpit procedure compliance, and crew training records. The DGCA also initiated discussions with Boeing about possible design changes to make mode confusion, mistaking flap controls for landing gear, impossible during takeoff. The investigation was no longer just about AI-171. It was becoming a catalyst for rethinking critical aspects of flight safety across the entire industry. As experts dissected the AI-171 disaster, one uncomfortable reality emerged. The more advanced aircraft become, the narrower the margin for error in their operation. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner is a marvel of engineering, with composite fuselage panels, fuel-efficient engines, and advanced flight management systems designed to make flying safer. But these same systems create an environment where pilots must rely heavily on automation, and where any deviation from expected procedure can have immediate, catastrophic consequences. Veteran safety analysts pointed to a growing dependency on automated systems, warning that manual flying proficiency was being eroded. In AI-171's case, if the crew had recognized the stall within the first few seconds and applied maximum thrust with nose-down inputs, there was a slim chance of recovery, but that window closed almost instantly. The lesson was clear. Modern cockpits need to balance technological sophistication with robust human-centered design, ensuring that pilots remain active decision-makers, not just system monitors. The tragedy of Air India 171 is not just the story of a single accident. It is the story of how aviation, despite being the safest mode of transport in history, still lives on the razor's edge of human and machine performance. In those final moments above Ahmedabad, a deadly sequence was set in motion by what investigators now believe was a flap retraction at the worst possible time, whether triggered by human error, faulty sensor data, or a mix of both. And once that chain began, there was no room for hesitation, no opportunity to undo it. The black box data leaves little doubt. Within seconds of takeoff, the Dreamliner was in an unrecoverable stall. Automation couldn't save it. Training couldn't save it. Even the skill of an experienced captain couldn't overcome the physics of a 200-ton jet losing lift barely 100 feet above the ground. But the discovery that shook the aviation world wasn't just the misconfiguration, it was how such a mistake could happen without immediate detection. The design of the flap and gear controls, the reliance on sensor feedback without redundant tactile verification, the absence of fail-safes to prevent such a scenario, all of it points to vulnerabilities in even the most advanced aircraft. Vulnerabilities that, until AI 171, were thought to be purely theoretical. For the families of the 274 souls lost, technical explanations will never fill the void. But for the global aviation community, this accident is a grim warning. The margin for error is shrinking, and in the relentless pursuit of efficiency and automation, we cannot afford to forget the basics of human-centered design and procedural discipline. The final report will likely recommend design modifications, new training protocols, and tighter maintenance oversight. But the haunting truth remains. Sometimes, in the complex dance between human and machine, all it takes is a single misstep for the music to stop. And the world, still reeling from what was uncovered, is left asking the same question. If this could happen to one of the most advanced passenger jets in the world, what else might be waiting, undetected, in the skies above us?